Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, December 21st. Signs continue to point to a colder weather pattern that should set up for the eastern and southern states as we transition from late December into early January at the end of next week, going into the following weekend. It looks like that transition in the upper part of the atmosphere will take place, and we'll take a look at some of the overnight model runs with respect to the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern here. And again, we have what looks like the development later next week into the following weekend of strong ridging up across the west central part of Canada. At the same time, an upper level trough will start to intensify across the southern and eastern U.S. We'll also take a look at the teleconnection index known as the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation, and the latest on an ongoing stratospheric warming event. I thought I'd start off here with a forecast map from last night's run of the operational version of the GFS for the temperature pattern on Christmas Day. That's this coming Monday afternoon, and looks like mild weather conditions across much of the mid-Atlantic region, northeast U.S. These are likely to be near the high temperatures on Christmas afternoon. We're pushing the 55-degree mark in the D.C. metro region, maybe the lower 50s across southeastern PA, Philadelphia, and surrounding suburbs, and well up in the 40s, maybe the mid to upper 40s across New York City. And again, relatively mild conditions. Looks like will dominate the scene Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday of next week in the mid-Atlantic, in the northeast U.S. It looks like another rain event will take place from later Tuesday into Wednesday. Low pressure pushes out of the southern states towards the Great Lakes, probably pushes more rain into the I-95 corridor later Tuesday evening, and that may continue into Wednesday. So again, after the next few days being quite chilly and dry, turns milder for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and eventually wetter later Tuesday into Wednesday. Well, let's take a look at the ensemble run of the European model from last night, and I showed a lot of ensemble runs in yesterday's video. These take all those individual members and come up with an ensemble mean, and that's what we're looking at here. And what we're focused in on here at the beginning is the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern. In this particular case, we're looking at December 30th, and then a few days later, January 3rd. And again, the big change, a few big changes evolving here over the next week to 10 days or so. By the time we get to the end of the month, we'll have strong upper level ridging set up over the west central part of Canada, just on the west side of Hudson Bay. This is Hudson Bay right here, outlined right here in central Canada. High pressure ridging dominating the scene over the west central part of Canada later next week, going into the early part of the following week. At the same time, a strong upper level trough will start to intensify across the southern and eastern states. We go out a few days later, still similar situation here in January 3rd, a high pressure region kind of focused on the west central part of Canada, and troughiness across the western Atlantic, all the way cutting across the southern and eastern U.S. Now, a couple of things here. First of all, notice the lines here, these equal lines of heights here, showing this kind of a wind flow actually coming across the North Pole. And that is what we call cross-polar flow that could be setting up by the time we get to the beginning part of January. That, of course, increases the chance for some very cold air to make its way from the Siberian side of the North Pole into this side, the Canadian side of the North Pole. So indeed, notice a change here in that overall wind flow by the early part of January. Cross-polar flow setting up. Also, a very active southern branch of the jet stream may indeed be unfolding by the early part of January, and that's pretty normal for an El Nino type of winter season that typically activates or enhances the southern branch of the jet stream. So with this troughiness setting up here, you can kind of expect the storm track to be in this particular region, and all of this enhances the chance for some snow in the eastern states, certainly if this sets up by the time we get into the early part of January. Well, how does this change in the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern affect temperatures? Here is a look at the 2 meter, the surface level temperature anomalies from the same ensemble run of the European 0Z last night. This is for December 30th, and then a few days later on January 3rd. Again, these are temperature anomalies at the surface level, and notice a kind of a broad area below normal conditions here, setting up for the eastern and southern U.S. Similarly, well above normal temperatures where that strong upper level ridge is sitting here, west central part of Canada. So this is an important change. Again, we'll have mild weather conditions Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week in this part of the nation. But by the time we get to the end of next week, early part of January, we'll start to set up with that colder pattern here across the east and the south. A few days later, similar, same kind of high pressure ridging sitting over west central Canada and kind of a broad area of below normal temperatures across the southern and eastern U.S. Not necessarily brutally cold, but certainly gets you in the ballpark for the possibility of snow, an increased possibility of snow across the mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. Again, not like a brutal Arctic air mass, but cold enough that it enhances the chance for snow, and it's certainly colder than what we'll experience during the first half of next week. Well, let's take a look at a teleconnection index now, known as the Madden-Julian oscillation. We refer to this occasionally here at arcfieldweather.com. This MJO index tracks a tropical disturbance that kind of rotates around the equatorial region of the globe on a pretty regular basis, and depending on its location and the given time of the year, it is usually pretty well correlated with certain temperature and precipitation patterns. In this particular instance of basically December, January, and February, we're seeing this MJO forecast in red going through what we call different phases. In this particular case, going through phase 8, 1, and 2. That basically refers to different locations around the tropical region, and this rotates on a counterclockwise method on this particular type of plot. And again, starting point today, December 21st, tends to rotate through phase 8, phase 1, and phase 2. Off to the right here, we have the temperature composite maps for those particular phases for this time of the year. And you can really see a pretty similar pattern here. Phase 8, generally speaking, colder than normal, south and east. Phase 1, same thing, generally speaking, colder than normal across the northern U.S. into the southeastern states. And phase 2, pretty widespread, colder than normal conditions. So the MJO is suggesting, it's kind of supporting the idea of a colder weather pattern setting up over the next week to 10 days or so across the eastern and southern states here as it rotates through some of these normally colder phases. Well, finally, let's wrap up with another interesting atmospheric phenomenon known as the stratospheric warming. This time of the year, we pay particular attention to the stratospheric temperatures. This is, we're talking about the top of the atmosphere, around 10 millibars, and there's, climatologically speaking, a polar vortex sitting near the North Pole this time of the year, but it can get displaced, it can get broken apart, weaken, and any one of those conditions can result in the transfer of cold air masses from the high latitudes into the middle latitudes. So that is why we pay particular attention to the stratospheric temperatures. Again, it can disrupt that polar vortex, which can lead to colder air masses making their way, in this particular case, perhaps from Canada into the U.S. And this is the forecast map from the European model run here for December 31st. And what we're looking at is the 10 millibar temperature anomalies, a stratospheric level. And this area, very cold air, but warmer than normal. And this is what we're talking about, kind of a stratospheric warming event that really gets underway here It's actually begun already, but it intensifies here by the time we get to the end of next weekend, the end of the month of December. This is, again, a forecast map from the European model for December 31st. That polar vortex kind of displaced off to the east. Then we go a few days later, January 2nd, and if anything, this warmer, the normal air kind of expands, kind of broadens into Canada with the polar vortex, that the colder temperatures associated with the polar vortex kind of shifting a little bit more away from the North Pole, which is right in the middle of this particular region. So again, we certainly have an ongoing stratospheric warming event that looks like it'll intensify the end of December, early January. Now, oftentimes stratospheric warming can lead to important changes in the temperature pattern across the U.S., but it may take a few weeks. So this kind of a stratospheric warming event could impact temperatures, let's say, across the central and eastern U.S. later in the month of January, but it's certainly something we will monitor closely over the next couple of weeks here going into the month of January. So a lot going on. It looks like a mild start to the Christmas week here coming up. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, very mild indeed. Christmas Day looks dry in the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast U.S., but more rain is on the way to the northeastern states for Tuesday into Wednesday. And then the overall weather pattern seems like it'll change to a colder pattern for the east and south late next week, the following weekend, into the early part of January, and we'll continue to monitor the teleconnection index known as the MJO, and of course this ongoing stratospheric warming event. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.